Welcome to Salesology, conversations with sales leaders, the art of faster, easier, more profitable sales. When you're ready to transform your sales for today's transforming market, we've got you covered with your host, the queen of cold calling and founder of Salesology, award-winning author, speaker, sales trainer, and coach, Wendy Weiss.
Hi, welcome to Salesology, conversations with sales leaders, the art of faster, easier, more profitable sales. And I'm your host, Wendy Weiss. I am the founder of Salesology and creator of the Salesology prospecting method. And I'm also known as the queen of cold calling. Today, my very special guest is Fred Cary. He is the CEO of IdeaPros, and he's a powerhouse entrepreneur. IdeaPros is a company that guides qualified entrepreneurs through the complexities and pitfalls of the startup world. With his entrepreneurial spirit, Fred has started many businesses in different industries. He has created many successes and acquired thousands of lessons along the way. And his desire is to give back to a community of like-minded eccentrics. And that's what led him to create IdeaPros, which is the world's first super venture partner, a company that could roll up its experienced sleeves and provide every entrepreneur with the opportunity to see their vision become a real company with a real product. And Fred also produces a weekly show for entrepreneurs that has been viewed by over 4 million people. So welcome, Fred.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here and flattered by the introduction. It sounds like my mom wrote it. And
she probably did, right?
Probably did.
Okay. So I always like to know, before we jump into the world of IdeaPros, I always kind of like to know the backstory. How did you get to where you are today, and what led you to start IdeaPros?
Well, what got me here is probably started around 17 or 18 years old when I figured out for the first time that I wasn't cut out to work for anybody else. It wasn't an inspirational moment. It was a moment of desperation of if I'm going to make it, I'm going to have to make it on my own because nobody's going to want me. And so that began the inspirational journey for me. 10 companies later, I started IdeaPros to try to have today's founders and entrepreneurs not have to go through all the same pitfalls and mistakes I went through on my journey to success.
Okay, well, I am curious about those pitfalls and mistakes. But before I ask you about all of that, I do want to ask you, because I was reading on your website that everything starts with the big idea. And so I'm curious, two things. What is a big idea, and how do you know if you have one? Well,
if you have an idea, it's probably inspired from something bigger than you realize, and you just have to find a way to connect with it. You know, I talk about this because of the fact when you are speaking to other people, whether they're customers, investors, your staff, whatever it is, you have to understand the greater underlying purpose that what you want to do today has been made possible by a series of events. For example, Airbnb, 2 years they couldn't raise any money because no venture capitalists could believe that people would let strangers stay in their homes. And the reason they didn't get any money is because they didn't understand the big idea. The big idea in their environment, unlike the problem, people need places to stay and people have homes. That's the problem. But that problem created a lot of friction. The big idea was the fact that everybody in America had been starting to look for a side hustle. You know, where can I get extra money? How can I get this extra when I want to work type job, when I want to make extra money type job? How can I do that? That, coupled with the fact that interest rates were rising in America, people were in danger of losing their homes. So get a side hustle, don't lose your home, and have somebody stay in a room once or twice a month. That is the big idea, the shift the shift in America that made what Airbnb wanted to do possible for the very first time. And had they started a conversation with the big idea, they would have never had all that pushback of like, what do you mean? People are going to let strangers stay with them? Yes, they are, because they don't want to be out in the street.
Okay. So if I'm understanding you correctly, I think I heard you say that Airbnb did not articulate that big idea that was kind of foundational to what they were trying to do. Therefore, the investors had no idea what they were talking about. Did I get that?
Yeah. I mean, they knew what they were talking about, but they didn't believe anybody would do it because they didn't believe anybody would let a stranger stay in their home. Without understanding the foundational, as you called it, elements of this big idea, Airbnb ended up, they were out raising $150,000 at a $1.5 million valuation, and they couldn't get that money. For 150 grand, you could be a multi-billionaire right now had you invested in that round. But they couldn't get people to do it because people didn't understand the big foundational element of that big idea that made what they wanted to do possible.
Okay. So how do you know if you have that big idea? You might have an idea that you think is great.
If it turns out it's not associated with a big idea, you need to move to the next one. And big ideas don't need to be huge. It needs to be kind of a shift in time that allows you and makes it the right timing for you to do what it is you want to do. You might be thinking about something very narrowly focused, but it's part of something more. We have I have 400 companies under IdeaPros right now, because when we partner with our founders, we take equity. So I have equity in 400 companies. Every one of them has a big idea. One example, a company called Olive and Coop. You can find it at oliveandcoop.com. They have a great site where elder people that want to, they're okay as far as mentally, they want to stay at home. That's where all the memories are. On one side of the equation, 92% of them actually want to stay home in place if they can. And on the young side of it, you have all these college students and recent graduates that can't afford their apartments. And so we created an environment that in exchange for doing chores around the house, helping out, making sure the older person's okay, instead of paying $3,000 for a one-bedroom apartment, you can pay $500 for a room with somebody that is, clean and meticulous and can be your grandma or granddad at the same time that you're out finishing your university. It became really something cool, but we had to find the big idea first. And the big idea in that one is, we have an aging population. There are millions of empty rooms in homes of elder Americans, and they have families sandwiched in between them and their grandchildren that are worrying about what to do with them, where are they going to go, how do we make sure they're taken care of? And you have that environment coupled with these crazy rents. So the big idea that made that possible now is that shift. Hunger for lower rents and hunger to stay in place. Those two things, that's the big idea.
Okay. I think I'm hearing you say that you might have a good idea that you think is a big idea, but it's only a big idea if it's linked to kind of facts on the ground that make it timely.
Yeah, there was a study, I think it was Harvard or Stanford, my apologies to whoever it wasn't. And a professor there did a study. He really looked at, I think something like 50 companies, really heavily funded companies, hundreds of millions of VC dollars poured into them, and really top-notch CEOs coming from the best schools with advanced degrees, big, powerful staff. And they found that the number one factor for the failure or success rates of these companies, all equal playing ground, was timing. And timing doesn't come from inside; it comes from your environment. So that's why you need to find, what is the bigger thing out there, the macro thing. It has nothing to do with you or your desires or what you think is cool. What's the big thing out there in the world that's changing that makes what you want to do powerful? Because then you're riding a huge wave if you're coming in with the right product or service at the right time and offering it to the right people.
Okay. So, continuing on with this idea of the big idea and getting the timing right, can you share with us some startup do's and startup don'ts? Like, what are the big mistakes, other than not having that big idea, that entrepreneurs make when they're starting?
Well, some of the big don'ts are around that environment of don't create something just because you think it's great. Do your research, go out there, look at the environment, look at the community you're trying to serve, and make sure it's something that they really want and they're not getting it well from somewhere else. You don't want to just go into something, even a quickly growing market, and be a Me Too product. And find what you have, the gem that you have is going to fill a hole in a marketplace that's growing. You can fill a hole. You have competitors that have already proved up the need, but they've also shown where they're weak, and you have an audience of customers that are clamoring for that one thing that you really need. Focus on that, focus on your audience, and make sure you're delivering to them what they want. That's a big thing. The number one factor behind failure in America of entrepreneurial businesses is the founder created something there's no demand for. It's not lack of money. It's the fact that you made something that nobody wants. How embarrassing is that? Especially with the internet nowadays, you could, in one day of work, you can find out exactly what you should be building, who the competitors are, and how to deal with their weaknesses. That's the number one factor of the don'ts that we have. The number two thing, I think, is as a founder, as an entrepreneur, you are the worst leader in the world. And people think of entrepreneurs and leaders as the same thing. But an entrepreneur is somebody who has to roll up their sleeves and go out and do it on their own. They don't have enough money to get a crew. They don't have people that believe in them. They haven't gotten their funding yet. They're the proverbial one-armed paper hanger. And so as you grow, letting go of those things and changing from this founder to a leader is a big, huge transition. And a lot of founders can't make that transition. They can't let go of the reins and put really, really experienced people around them. And that's a fatal mistake, because then you become a micromanager and your company can't grow. And I think the third thing on the don'ts, I'll focus on that part of it, is you think things are going to happen faster, you're going to make more money than you're going to make, and you are very ill prepared financially to cope with those issues. And so the founders of today need to be financial CEOs. You need to be thinking about money all the time. You need to be closing a round, being in between rounds, or starting your next round, because growth can only go so far with cash flow. You have to be able, if you're doing really, really well, it's going to be last month's money that's going to pay for this month's bill. And if you're growing really rapidly, there's not enough money. You have too much month for your money, as I used to say when I couldn't afford rent right after I got out of high school. And so those are the elemental factors that create businesses to fail. On the do side of it, it's the opposite of everything I just said. Do be prepared financially. Do understand what investors want. Do know what that whole in the customer experience is. And the most important do thing is do try to make yourself obsolete every day. Why? Because if you're getting successful and you're not thinking that way, you have competitors that are going to make you obsolete on their own. So you go in there and every morning when you wake up, how can I do this better? What can I do differently? What did I learn yesterday? How can I deploy what I learned yesterday today to make what I have to offer better and better, day after day, week after week, year after year?
Okay. So you're not saying make yourself obsolete as in delegating. You're saying make yourself obsolete in terms of making whatever the offering is better.
Yes, absolutely. If you're Royal Typewriters, don't sit there and just make typewriters till you go into oblivion. You guys have to look up Royal Typewriters.
Okay. So I'm curious about something that you said about entrepreneurs versus leaders. And what is your advice for an entrepreneur making that transition? Like, because I have also seen it, business owners that just can't let go of anything. What is your advice to those business owners to let go so that the company can grow.
Yeah, I'll talk about Richard Branson, the head of Virgin. He was asked about his repeated successes and how he became a billionaire. And he said, well, you come up with really good ideas, flesh them out, surround yourself with really good people, and get the hell out of the way. That's his advice. And so if you don't make that transition, you're hurting yourself. So what is leadership all about that's different than entrepreneurship? As you said, leadership is about letting go of the reins. Leadership is working really hard to surround yourself with people that are smarter than you. And I hate that phrase in a way, but I think what the phrase really means, in their own verticals, in their own specialties. You get somebody who's the best salesperson you ever found, like you with all your cold calling. I'm going to talk to you after the show. Get great marketing folks, operational excellence. Most importantly, get a CTO or somebody heading your finance that their job is to make sure you don't run out of money. Surround yourself with those people, and it only will work out to your benefit. So leadership's about letting go, and letting go along with giving power.
Absolutely, because otherwise, as the company does grow, however it grows, and you've got more people, you've just got more people that you're micromanaging, which has to make you crazy or crazier.
Yeah, and severely limits your growth.
And severely limits your growth. So we're going to pause now for a word from our sponsor. But when we come back, I want to hold Fred's feet to the fire, because I want to know a little bit more about, once you have that big idea and it's timely and you've done your research and you're hiring the right people and you're getting out of the way, how do you get capital? So, and then I also want to talk a little bit about founder fatigue, because I was reading about that on your website as well. So, okay. But now we're going to pause for a word from our sponsor, the Salesology Vault. And just about every guest that I've interviewed on the Salesology Conversations with Sales Leaders podcast has had a free gift for our listeners. And that includes my special guest today, Fred Cary. He has a free gift just for you. So what we've done is we've taken all of those gifts and we put them all in one place. And we call it the Salesology Vault. It's packed full of free gifts from sales leaders, sales experts, marketing gurus, revenue generation experts, and we add another gift every single week. We release a podcast every Monday, and when we do, we add a gift. So you can log in as often as you'd like. You can download as many gifts as you'd like. It's all free. So the link to the Salesology Vault is in the show notes. As soon as you finish listening to this podcast, go to the show notes, click on the link. You'll be glad you did. And we are back with my special guest, Fred Cary, who is the CEO of IdeaPros, and we are talking all things startup. So, Fred,
Hey.
Assuming you have everything in place, you've got the big idea and it's timely and you've done your research, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. How do you raise capital?
Yeah, and
easy question, right? Just go do this.
It's an easy question. How you raise capital is you need to learn how to think like an investor and provide for them the things that they need. Most of us, when we go to talk to somebody who has capital for us, we want to start out talking about how revolutionary our idea is, how it's going to change the world, how there's no competitors because nobody's ever thought of anything like this before. Those things scare the hell out of investors. Even when you're talking about pre-seed, the very early investors that have big, huge risk tolerance, when you start talking that way, they're going to start thinking about, well, how many times have you changed the world before? So the biggest thing is learning how an investor thinks. They're not buying your dreams, they're buying your stock. They don't care that you want to change the world. They want to know how you're going to change their world. So you start with a big idea to make sure they bought in, just like with Airbnb, right? Had they started with their big idea, they would have gotten, here I am criticizing billionaires, but they would have gotten their money sooner and been even bigger had they started with a big idea. So understanding that what a risk-tolerant investor wants to know is that you're going into a healthy marketplace that's growing quickly, that has healthy competition, that are doing at least one thing wrong or not doing it at all. And you have a set of customers that are screaming for that one thing. That makes an investor really happy because you're showing them there's a market, it's growing. Other companies have proven that market out. You're just some dumb person that came up and found a hole in the marketplace, and now you're running with that hole in your hands, and all these customers are going to run after you because they all want that one thing that you now have. Me as an investor, I'm going to look at that and go, great. That's a really good market to be in because it's proven out. So again, think like an investor. That means every single slide that you have, there should be a number attached to it. Like, we're increasing revenue by X% every month for the first 2 years. This business sector is this big and growing by 14% every year. 48% of Americans really want to have this golden widget that I'm creating. Whatever it is, almost every single slide should have a number attached to it. And you should always keep in mind, think of an investor. Why am I paying this much for my stock certificate? How much am I going to get when I'm ready to sell it? And how am I going to be able to sell it and when? And then finally, why are you people the ones that are going to make this all happen? Right. And so you really need to think that way. And by the way, our free gift goes into that subject matter really, really deeply.
Okay. And so I'm hearing you say you kind of need a plan.
Oh, yeah.
You want to raise capital, you kind of need a plan.
Yeah. You need to be able to show that you understand the playing field that you're in. You didn't show up to the football game with a basketball. And fundamentally, if you can show your audience, your financial audience, that this is a good game to play and that you're well equipped to play it, and there's the big potential for being in the Super Bowl, they're going to want to invest in you. And when you have you have times when people say, well, it's not a great time for investment or raising capital. Money is always out there. And when it's a bad time for raising capital, quote unquote, that means there's more money than ever that's available, because it's not that nobody has any money. It's all these venture firms, private equity firms, angel investors, they have all this money and they're holding it because they want to be really careful about the investments they make. So there's more money when times are hard instead of less money. It's just stingy money. And that means you really need to prove yourself out as being different, being better, and being able to execute. Then you'll get your check.
Well, it's very interesting to me that everything that you just described, with minor tweaks, I could be saying if I'm teaching a class on sales. And one of the objections people hear all the time when they are selling things is, well, I don't have any money. Which to me always goes back to, you're probably not talking about it. If assuming you're talking to the right person, you're probably not talking about it right.
Exactly. I mean, I don't consider myself a sales expert at all, but all the executives that work for me, they're the best salesmen they ever met. And why? Because I don't sell. I lay things out. I talk about the benefit people are going to have working with us, what they're going to get for their lives that's going to be better for them, rather than please buy this and when you give you a 20% discount. So when you focus on the needs of that person, then you're not really selling at all. And I don't have any money is bull, because they're talking to you. If they're talking to you, obviously there's money somewhere. You have to give them enough inspiration to say, you know what, I really need to do this, and I need to do it with these people. How much is this going to cost me?
Exactly. So I do want to touch on, before we finish, because I found this article to be very interesting. You were talking about the difference between founder fatigue and burnout, and the two different things. And I'm wondering if you could expound on that a bit.
Well, I hope I say it the same way I said it in the article. But, look, first of all, you're swimming with sharks the minute you decide to become an entrepreneur. And so the ability for failure to find you is 100%. And you're going to fail repeatedly, and everything's going to take longer. You're going to have missteps. You're going to have these trials and tribulations. And guess what? You're going to go to sleep and you wake up tomorrow, you're going to have them again. And so founder fatigue can happen from this repeated waves washing against you, the waves of this is taking too long. I don't have enough money. The prototype isn't anything like what I thought it was going to be. Our first customer beta test on our app was a disaster. All these things are going to happen all the time. So as a founder, you have this fatigue naturally built into the system that you can work on it. Founder burnout, on the other hand, is almost fatal. I mean, when you have that total burnout, you got to let go of the reins, step away, and just reinvigorate yourself. Take a week, a month, if you can, sabbatical, and get away from that. Because once you get to that point, you can't think, you can't process, you can't come up with solutions because you're so over it that you're done.
Okay, so to end on a happier note,
that's a happy note for me.
Well, a happy note for me. What are all the good things about being an entrepreneur at a startup?
Entrepreneurs are the only people that change the world. That's a good thing about being an entrepreneur.
That's a good thing.
Yeah, very short, very sweet. Everybody can work 9 to 5. There's a job out there waiting for you. You work your 40 hours. You're going to get bonuses 2 or 3 times a year. You have a health plan, 401k that your corporation's going to contribute to, and they'll exploit you for the rest of your career. You can only go so far up that ladder, except 1 or 2 people. Every entrepreneur has an opportunity to succeed. There is no infrastructure above you preventing you from reaching your maximum capabilities. So the reason it's hard, it's the same reason it's hard to win the Super Bowl. It's the same reason to go in the prize fight as a heavyweight fighter and win the title. It's the same thing of Taylor Swifts of the world or the Coldplays of the world. Years and years and years of missteps and trials and tribulations. But those are the only people that actually go and make differences in the world, the ones that are willing to go through that fire.
Oh, I love that. So I know, Fred, we talked about it before. You have a gift for our listeners. So share a little bit about your gift for our listeners.
Yeah, so I had 100,000 people apply to work with me when I started IdeaPros. It was mind-boggling, it was overwhelming, and I couldn't possibly handle it. And the one thing that I learned about every single one of us is we all need to raise capital. We're uncomfortable raising capital, and we don't know how to do it well. And so I started something called Pitchcraft, which is completely free. Obviously, at the end, we'll try to upsell you, but don't listen to us if you don't think you have value. But it's 2 hours. It's pitch.ideapros.com. And I'm going to teach you how to take what you have and turn it into that big idea, a personalized story that investors will listen to. And we'll go slide by slide as to what you should be saying, how you should be saying it, and what numbers you should attach to it to really escalate your capability of raising capital. So that's pitch.ideapros.com. And frankly, if you just go to ideapros.com and become a member, there's a free membership. We'd send you a whole bunch of stuff on that very first week, 7 different elements of what it really takes to start a successful business. And then every week we'll send you free updates again. It's just a membership thing where you can get data and you can learn more about how to be a successful entrepreneur.
Okay. Well, if you didn't have a chance to jot down that URL, it's okay because we're putting it in the show notes for Pitchcraft. So as soon as you finish listening to this podcast, go to the show notes, click on the link. And Fred, if people want to connect with you, where should they go? Well,
again, connect with me kind of globally at ideapros.com. You can go on my Instagram. My Instagram's official Fred Cary, Cary. I have about 500,000 followers. I'd like to crank that number up some. So come join the fun. I provide free information every day. It's a minute of hopefully inspirational things that you should do as an entrepreneur or business owner. And finally, if you have a great idea and you want to work with me, this is what my assistant always kills me for saying this publicly, but just write to me at fred@ideapros.com. And I'm happy to return your email. Whether I can help you or not, I'll direct you to the right place if I can't.
Okay, wonderful. And again, if you didn't have a chance to write that all down, all of the links, Fred's email address, his Instagram, website, everything is going to be in the show notes. So as soon as you finish listening to this podcast, go to the show notes, click on the links.
Perfect.
And you have been listening to Salesology, Conversations with Sales Leaders, with my special guest, Fred Cary. He is the CEO of IdeaPros. And if you found value in listening to today's podcast, then please think about one business owner, one entrepreneur, someone that you know that you think might also find value in listening to the podcast. And please do share the link with them. And until we meet again, visualize yourself surrounded by cash, really large bills.
You've been listening to Salesology, Conversations with Sales Leaders, the art of faster, easier, more profitable sales. Be sure to follow so that you don't miss a single episode. And while you're at it, please leave a rating and review, and be sure to share it with your friends. Tune in every week for more exciting insights and wisdom on transforming sales. And until next time, visualize yourself surrounded by cash, very large bills.